Jerry, welcome, thank you. And now we have two Jerrys on the call, and both are Jerry K's.
Good combo.
Thank you, and yeah, good combo, yes. And Jerry Kilty, you remember Bill Kernodle?
I do. Hi, Bill.
Yes.
Hey, Jerry.
So we'll get started in a couple of minutes. We'll just give folks a couple of minutes to join, dial in, all that. So Jerry Kilty, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Doing great. Been busy already this morning.
Good. So Jerry, would you like us to introduce you in the beginning? Is that okay with you? I'll just give a shout out to you.
Sure, that's fine.
Front, yeah.
Yeah, sure, that's fine.
All right. Okay, I'm waiting for people to dial into the conference. If are on. Okay. So Jerry Kilty, how's the weather in Tampa today?
Well, we're starting to see a little sunshine today. Yesterday we had just about rain all day long, way overdue to help keep some moisture in our grass. But it's still a little windy and maybe not quite to chamber weather, but pretty close.
Okay. All right, and it's getting warmer here in Carolinas as well. So, all right. On that note, we'll get started. It's 12:02 Eastern Time. So thank you for joining. My name is Sri Rajagopalan with the Murano Corporation, and along with me we have Jerry Kopecki. Jerry, say hello to the audience.
Hello, welcome everybody.
And we also have Jerry Kilty from Quality Management Solutions. I want to give a shout out to Jerry, another Jerry K. So now Jerry is my S&OP guru. I go to him for any S&OP related questions, and he is based in Tampa, Florida, and he has his own company called Quality Management Solutions. Very active in the Apex circles. And Jerry, I want to give you a couple of seconds for you to introduce yourself.
Yes. Well, thank you, Sri, and hi, everybody. I am Jerry Kilty. To give you just a real quick perspective, I spent 25 years working for Westinghouse Electric Corporation when it existed. I've enjoyed lots of locations, Indiana, Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh was Westinghouse's headquarters. Texas, North Carolina, and then eventually my travels ended up here in sunshiny Florida, which I've been down here now for some years. After Westinghouse, I actually started my own company, Quality Management Solutions, as Sri mentioned. Been going at it for about 26 years, so if you add the two numbers together, I've got over 50 years of practical experience. About 25 years ago, right after I started the company, I got hooked up with Apex, really fell in love with their educational model, and ever since I've been very, very active in several different levels, including instructing all of the Apex content. So I am a Apex Master Instructor for the certifications CPIM and CSCP. I'm only an associate instructor for CLTD, the logistics certification that just came out, and that's because I'm just starting to teach it. So that's a little background on me.
Perfect. And one thing Jerry didn't mention was that he is, Jerry, you're a contributing editor or a reviewer of Tom Wallace's S&OP handbook, right?
That is true. I have been requested by not only Tom, but a few other authors, Robert Jacobs, who writes a very good textbook for supply chain management. Both those authors have enjoyed my critique of their material.
Perfect, perfect. All right, the next person I want to introduce real quick is Bill, and we're going to bring Bill back towards slide 7 to talk more. But Bill, if you want to briefly introduce yourself, and I go to Bill when I have questions on theory of constraints, Six Sigma, Lean, and DDMRP, etc. So Bill's my go-to guy for all that wealth of knowledge. So Bill, if you want to say a couple of words and introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you, Sri. I'm at Clemson, South Carolina. I have run an advanced manufacturing model factory for the last 20 or so years, funded by the Defense Department, and I've spent most of my time working on supply chain optimization, and I'll talk a little bit about that later.
Thank you, Bill. So thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Bill. So let's get started. So today we're going to talk about demand planning without spreadsheets. So yesterday someone was telling me, introduce a new term to me. I hadn't heard of this before, but MBE, management by Excel. So I got to give the credit to James Moore. So he gave me the term, introduced me to the term management by Excel. So enterprises they're awash with spreadsheets, and companies use spreadsheets so many different ways. And what we want to introduce something today is how can you do demand planning without spreadsheets? Spreadsheets are good in some ways, but they're also bad in other ways. So we want to tell you and introduce an alternative approach to demand planning that you may find more valuable. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about. So, but before we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to quickly run through a couple of things that we covered last webinar. But we're going to fly through that because a lot of you folks are new. We haven't seen this. And secondly, because this is kind of the building block to the key point that we're going to cover today, demand planning without spreadsheets. So we're going to cover what bimodal inventory distribution is real quickly, and we'll talk about the organizational maturity and all that, and then the supply chain predictive intelligence. We're going to fly through that section, and then we're going to go to the demand planning without spreadsheets. So that's what we're going to cover today, okay? So first, we covered this last week, but bimodal inventory distribution, you don't have you either have too much of the wrong inventory or too little of the right one, leading to too much cash being occupied, too much capacity, too much space, and all that. So you want to be in the middle of this, and that's where this is what we call bimodal inventory phenomenon. This is what we're going to address today. So we're going to talk about how we can optimize inventory, have the right amount of inventory, and not the inventory of the wrong kind. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about, bimodal inventory distribution. And before we go any further, we're going to talk about the organization's maturity level. Take a look at this. So what we're finding is that most organizations are level 1, level 2, because their employees are spending so much time collecting data into their systems, spreadsheets, ERP systems, etc., that they have very little time to analyze or have the skill set to analyze, and nor do they have the tools to improve the processes and measure the results. So we want to get organizations to level 3, level 4, level 5 in terms of maturity. What we're finding is that uniformly across organizations, they are level 1, level 2. So the employees and contractors spend so much time collecting data that they don't have the time to analyze the data and look for patterns and see what they can do to improve the process. Along with that, what I want to add is the fact that in this day and age of Amazon, we want to have systems do more than just collect data and more than just analysis of data. Because what you need to be able to do is we need systems that can predict and alert on future inventory stockouts, for example, or if you have too much of inventory. That's where we want the systems to evolve, kind of like your Google Maps or Waze, where it can predict there's going to be an accident. There's an accident and you probably should take a detour. We want corporate enterprise systems to do the same thing, right? So not just for data collection. Historically, the systems that have been built for enterprises are built to collect data and then maybe a little bit of analysis. Analysis was an afterthought. So we want to get them to level 4 and level 5. All right, so let's talk about IBP and SNOP. And again, if you need to know more about IBP and SNOP, no better source to go is talk to Jerry Kilty and or Bill Kernodle. So SNOP is operations planning based on internal historical data and some forecasts that we come up with internally, where when you combine that with forecasting replenishment, that's what IBP is. And this is fairly common in the automotive space, and we're We're very familiar with the automotive space, where Honda, for example, shares their forecast, shipment schedules, and all that electronically. And when you can combine that external data with internal inventory and replenishment data, then you can fairly accurately predict future stockouts. So that's where we want to get to. That's more demand-driven planning strategy. And the fundamental key here is that the key metric is the days of supply, not how many pieces of the raw material you have. So days of supply is how we want to measure. Do you have enough inventory to last the lead time, of a particular raw material? That's what we want to get to. So the tremendous amount of benefits if you go to this model. Okay, so now we also understand that not every industry has this level of collaboration with its supply chain partners, but if you can move to that area, where you can collaborate with your supply chain partners, the benefits are tremendous. So IBP and collaboration, that's what we're talking about here. So in this case study, and we covered this last week, but we're just going through real quick because the foundation of what we're going to talk about next is that the three things are very important: people, process, and technology. So you got to have people who are qualified, people who have the right mindset, they want to continuously improve things, and they're open to change. That's critical, right? That's very important. And then the second key thing is the process. So when you introduce change, you probably have to tweak processes, look at best practices, and be ready to introduce those processes to your enterprise where applicable. That's also extremely important, and you got to execute the process and follow the process in a disciplined manner. So no deviation from that, no exceptions to that. So that's the second key piece. So and the third piece is the technology. So the technology is the third piece, and the technology, the key thing is, like I said earlier, is the ability to predict things, and not just to collect the data, but also predict things and also alert when there's going to be some issues. That's the kind of technology you need to have. So all three are critical: people, process, and technology. And then the technology, the other thing is what we're finding is that enterprises, and we'll talk about this in the next slide, enterprises have a collection of different systems that are stovepiped. They don't talk to each other. The lack of integration is really hurting them also. So integrated technology is also important. So in this case, the Honda Tier 1 supplier, what they were able to do is they were able to combine the external supply chain partners' data with their internal data. And when they were able to combine that, they were able to do predictive intelligence. And they were able to replace spreadsheets with a software platform, and then they were able to accurately predict runouts and all that. Okay. All right. So this is the other thing that we see. So what we see is the left side is what most companies are dealing with. They're struggling with that. So they have an ERP system, and then surrounding the ERP system, they have other collection of systems, the spreadsheets, access database, custom programs, etc. And there's very little integration between systems within an enterprise and then also without their enterprise, outside the enterprise as well. So that integration, it's on the left side. This is what I see repeatedly. Now on the right side, this is the exception. This is where you want to get to. First, within the four walls of your enterprise, you need to have integration, right? You need to have a single system or systems that talk to each other so you can have the information flowing in and you can see end-to-end visibility. And then also, secondly, if you can integrate the customer data and the supplier data to your internal data, with your internal data, that's going to make things even more powerful. And so here's where some of the older ERPs fall short, is that they are not able to accommodate supply chain partners' data. So they don't have, as Jerry, you might say, the reference model and the ability to support supply chain partners' data within a single ERP system. And that leads to problems. So that leads to an inability to predict things and alerts. And you have excess inventory. And when you have uncertainty and lack of visibility, the result is a high safety stock level. So that leads us to the topic of the day, which is demand planning without supply chain intelligence. That leads to high safety stock levels. And what companies, organizations do, the demand planners do, or the materials manager will do, is they'll end up using spreadsheets for this versus using their stock ERP. So companies spend millions on ERP, and then because the ERP doesn't have accurate inventory data or timely inventory data, or they don't have supply chain partners data, Or the system is not easy to use, it's not built on standards, it's time consuming. What demand planners and materials managers and production planners, what they'll end up doing is they'll export the data to Excel, and then they'll try to manage using Excel. And to safeguard against stockouts, what they do is they have high safety stock levels, which leads to higher inventory and high inventory carrying costs. So this is what we see uniformly across a number of industries, a number of companies.
Sri?
So, yes, Jerry.
Quick comment on the spreadsheet analysis there. It's ironic to me that in Tom Wallace's last edition of his S&OP how-to book, he even goes so far as to recommend that companies use spreadsheets to get started. I believe that recommendation is actually based on the fact of what you just said. They're not thinking how to use their ERP data to manage and plan at the S&OP level. So I find it just, there's an irony to this whole session, I think, relative to we really don't want to recreate the world, or as we tend to with worksheets. Just a quick comment.
That's right. And it's a good, go ahead, Jerry.
Another quick comment about spreadsheets is that spreadsheets plus many years of experience allow folks, companies to survive. And here we're trying to, if you will, where you want to be best practices, use technology and to use a very overworked phrase, you're trying to dumb down the years of experience with technology to something less than spreadsheets.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're trying to do here. Spreadsheets are good, years of experience are good, but there are better ways.
That's right. Totally right. That's brilliant. And what happens is when your staff is so focused on creating spreadsheets and collecting data and massaging the data and making it look pretty, what happens is they're still on level 2, right? They have very little time to analyze the data because they spend so much time collecting the data and formatting it. And so that's where we want to get them to level 5. If you have systems that are integrated, are easy to use, they're intuitive, have timely information, accurate information, then you don't need to be spending all your time on Excel spreadsheets. You can be on level 5 doing more productive things for your organization, and that's what we're trying to say. Now, I forgot to talk about something here, so I'm good. Let me go back to slide 7 here. And so in this slide 7, now, and this is where I wanted to give Bill a chance to explain this. Bill, are you still on, Bill?
Yes, I'm on, and I'll take it for about a minute here.
Okay, go ahead, Bill.
For the last 20 years, we've worked at Clemson and developed a level 7, actually. Very, very difficult to get people to move to that level, and we were able to implement it because of a special situation with a government contract that required every supply chain partner to participate. But let me build a vision for you. When you get up to that level, we were able to eliminate almost all of the need for safety inventory. Safety inventory is the majority of the inventory you have to carry. So when we got multiple players, and we had some 12 players in the supply chains to work together to synchronize completely, we were able to eliminate all stockouts and 90% of all inventories. That can be achieved. And we're still working at it, and there's still more to do. So we're up at that top level over to the right of what you can accomplish if you're doing everything right with your standard systems. And by the way, we did eliminate the spreadsheets. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, Bill, and the key point that you raise is the collaboration between the 12 partners, and they're working in sync and exchanging data that really helps the entire supply chain, right? That's the key thing here, right?
That's the hard part. It's the people part that's the difficult part. The technology is basically out there to go up all those steps, but it's the people part that's the real challenge.
Perfect. All right, perfect. Thank you, Bill, for that words of wisdom. So here's an example of how you could potentially do something without relying on spreadsheets, right? Where you're combining. This is an example of how things could look in a new world, and what we want to share is how it could look like this. And this is based on APIC standards, APIC terminology, right? And it's not, the terminology has not been come out, it has not been designed by an engineer sitting in a basement, but by APIC professionals who have many years of industry experience with supply chain background and all that. So this is how you look like. The first thing that we give your planner should have access to is, it's like a table of contents or an index where they can have alerts and they can have the requirements, and the requirements will include both supply chain partners' requirements and internal requirements, right? So the independent requirements could be driven by supply chain partners' demand signals and or something that's generated internally, like a forecast or a sales order. So that's where something like this would be really beneficial, right? And it's easy to understand. Terminology is good. It's planning aid, color code, and all that. And then you can look at a bunch of things, right? So that's the first thing. And so the key things here are, you have both the independent and dependent requirements. You have real-time supply chain intelligence, and then it's intuitive. So by intuitive, I mean, if you know what you're doing in the supply chain world, you know the terminology, you are familiar with something like APIC, then you should be able to quickly pick this up without extensive training, right? You don't need to go through 2 weeks of training for this. You should be able to pick up this capability in half an hour or so, right? So that's the kind of things that we're talking about. So that's the first thing. This is kind of like a table of contents. And then when you drill into each one where there's an alert, something where you're going to be flashing red, for example, then this is the kind of screen that you would see where you have the details, right? So you have the projected available gross requirements, net requirements is right out of the APIC book of in a body of knowledge, scheduled receipts. So when a demand planner looks at this, I understand, he or she'll say, I understand what these terms mean. And then you can see the requirements here, right here, and the projected available gross requirements. You should be able to see your supply chain partners' requirements also, right? So you should be able to see that. And then on the top here, you have standard things like on hand and minimum order quantity, safety stock, and lead time, lot size, etc. So this is something that you can use to easily understand where the shortages will be and what you need to plan for. Okay. So so again, it's built on standards like APIC standards. So the terminology is something that you can fairly quickly pick up. It's easy to navigate. It has all the key pieces of information. It has the most critical thing is it has the real-time intelligence in external data as well as internal data, and you have all that in a single screen. That's the convergence we're talking about. Okay. And then from there, if you're a production planner, if you need to release planned orders or production orders, you can go from there and directly create the planned orders. Or if you want to run MRP based on that, you can do that. Or if you're a purchase planner, you can generate purchase requisitions. You can run MRP on demand or have the system generate purchase requisitions and all that for you. So that's what we're talking about at a high level in terms of an alternative to planning without spreadsheets. Okay, and if you have the supply chain data that you get from your supply chain partners, forecasts from your customers, for example, if you're in the retail space, if you do a lot of business with Walmart, if they typically share the forecast data with you, or if you have access to the depletion data through Retail Link, for example, if you can get that and combine that with your internal systems, then you can actually forecast your revenues and cost of goods sold and the margins and compare that against the actual numbers and then look at that against the historical numbers. You have all that in a single system. That's the power of supply chain predictive intelligence. And you don't need to do all this with spreadsheets, and you don't need to spend hours collecting this data to create pretty spreadsheets. But this is all possible with that integration with your supply chain partners. So if you do all this, we fundamentally are able to crack this bimodal inventory challenge. That's the biggest benefit. And you can cut down on excess inventory. You can avoid stockouts, and you can positively impact the balance sheet of your organization.
You flatten out the peaks and valleys.
That's right.
You flatten your line.
Exactly right. Okay, so we have 4 minutes to go before this webinar ends. I want to see if there are any questions or comments or comments from Jerry Kilty, Bill, or Jerry Kopecki, or anyone else. Any comments? We're open to questions. If you would like, prefer typing it on the chat window, that's fine too.
So, Sri, while people are gathering their thoughts, I'll make a quick comment that takes it back to the S&OP process. There's an absolute need to have the proper balance between all this data detail and in the S&OP process remain at a big picture level. I see what gets in the way is that of S&OP is companies start to become very short-term and overwhelmingly at a level of detail that their master schedulers should be working at. The beauty here with this integrated system is that it reverses the process. You pyramid up the big picture data from all the detailed data, and now you've got accurate information going forward. And you can hopefully avoid the pitfall that S&OP seems to have too many of, and that is getting bogged down in the short term and the detail. And they shift it away from long-term planning and into short-term master scheduling. So just a quick comment.
And Jerry, that's an important point. The S&OP is more longer term, right? It's more, the horizon is 18 months, right? Correct me if I'm wrong here, right?
At a minimum. A minimum of 18 months by most of us that get into this process. Yes.
And there's some level of executive involvement or upper management involved in that S&OP process, right?
There's the S&OP process should be conducted by the top executives of the company.
Right.
And it should be a ongoing decision-making process that guides the ship.
Okay. And it's the direction from the executive saying this is where we're headed and this is where we'd like to go and things of that sort, right? And our targets and right. Okay.
Exactly. So
perfect.
Did that allow some time for some people to chat a question?
Yes. Any questions on S&OP, IBP, demand planning without spreadsheets, the integration, all that? Any other questions?
Or spreadsheet defenders.
Defenders, yes, that's right. And on the 25th of April, we're going to have another session where we talk more about, and Jerry Kilty, you're going to be on that call, on that webinar as well. You'll be talking a little bit more about some of the types of supply chain education, APICS education that you provide to your audiences and your customers, right?
Yes, definitely. I'm going to give you a perspective of all the possible certification credentials that you can get that are definitely sponsored by APICS. I'll throw in a few others that I'm familiar with, but not to the same degree of detail, and tie it to exactly what your message has been both today and last webinar.
Perfect. And if you haven't heard of APICS, I would definitely have ask you to check out APICS website, and having APICS certified people in your organization is definitely a plus. I can see a definite ROI. I've seen that, and that brings a new level of competence to your organization, having APICS certified people in your organization.
Absolutely. One of the comments that I throw in here is that we had, past tense, a company in the backyard here of Clearwater, Florida, that the IT manager insisted that every one of his IT professionals go through my CPIM classes and earn that CPIM certification. And I found that quite unique in that typically we our audience is more planners and buyers and folks of that nature, and as opposed to IT professionals. And his logic, very sound logic, is that IT is a service organization to help manufacturing get their job done. If the IT people can't speak the language of the manufacturing group, they're not going to be very good. And he's absolutely correct. So an excellent example of a progressive organization. They became so good, they got attractive and got bought by General Electric.
Good, good, good. Excellent, excellent. Any other questions? So I don't see any other questions in the chat window or from anyone in the audience. If that there's no more questions, we'll bring this call to an end. Jerry Kilty, thank you for your time. Bill Kernold, thank you for your time. And Jerry Kopecki, thank you for joining. And I'll bring this meeting to an end.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.